Hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. Well, today we're talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 3, our time travel episode with Latta and Kirk, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I thought it was a quite interesting story. We've got a bit of time travel escapades between these two characters, and we also kind of did a bit of retconning of a bit of Starfleet history with the whole augment situation with Khan and the augment rebellion and so forth. So it seems like we've had a little bit of an official shift in times here in terms of what exactly our history is in this department. Today we're going to have a look through the episode, check out all the bits and pieces that we saw, all of the cool little moments and references back to past Star Trek episodes and everything. And go through that bit by bit. So let's get into this week's episode, Tomorrow, Episode 3, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 2. So the episode starts off with a bit of a security log thing happening with Latta. She's talking to various different crew members. I think that we saw, correct me if I'm wrong, it almost looked like we had a Denobulan here as one of the aliens in this transporter room scene. Spock seems to be getting some complaints about his lute playing in his quarters there, and it looks like we've got Pelia hoarding a bit of ancient artwork and everything. Latta pulling her up on some of the acquisitions she have there, and should she have all of these particular items? She's been gathering them for quite some time, and obviously she's brought them out of storage and on board the ship. They obviously needed just to check a few boxes to make sure that she's not maybe bringing any contraband on board that she necessarily shouldn't be. Next we see Latta and Mbenga doing a bit of sparring. Here's another chance for Babs to show his jiu-jitsu prowess. Obviously they're giving Babs a bit more to do in the hand-to-hand combat department this season, based on the fact the actor has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So it's interesting to see. And next we see our time-travelling time cop appear in the hallway there. He's been shot. He's obviously having a conversation with Latta and telling her that she needs to fix the timeline and fix the whole situation to what's been changed. There's been an attack and everything, and she has to correct it. And as I mentioned in the sneak peek scene analysis earlier in the week, our graphics and everything here on his little tricorder-like device are straight from the Voyager episode Relativity. So obviously this time cop is from the same department as Wells and Braxton and everything from that Relativity Voyager episode. So the timeline's changed. Pike's no longer in command. Obviously Kirk is now the captain of the Enterprise, but it's not not Starfleet and the Federation anymore. It's the United Earth Fleet. There's been obviously a big war with the Romulans. The Vulcans aren't part of Earth. They're independent. Spock's on the view screen asking for a bit of assistance from Kirk, but they just want to look after themselves. There's no alliances or anything. Everybody's just fending for themselves here. And it's a bit sad to see that there's no cooperation between Kirk and Spock in any way in this alternate timeline. We get a chat in the ready room with Latta kind of briefing Kirk about the whole timeline change business and the fact they have to go and correct it, and he's got to help her and everything. And they inadvertently push the button on the device and end up getting transported back to 21st century Toronto, where all this change in the timeline business has occurred. When they're standing outside the Heaton Centre, there's a nice reference in the background there. Dr. Keeler, no doubt a reference to Edith Keeler from the TOS episode City on the Edge of Forever. We get some funny scenes here in the retail store with Kirk and Latta changing their outfits and putting on exactly the same clothes initially, and then Kirk's got to go back and change his clothes, and then they've got to work out how they're going to pay for it. So they set off the security tag device in the store so that they can walk out the door unobstructed by security. So there's a little bit of sneakiness going on there on that behalf. So there's a few cute moments here in this episode like that. It's clear that they need some money to survive in this particular time frame, so that Kirk ends up playing a bit of 2D chess, which he's an absolute master at because he's used to the obviously the more futuristic 3D chess, and he can wipe the floor with anybody playing 2D chess. Therefore, they've made a few extra bit of cash so they can go and buy hot dogs and things like that. So that's kind of, it was a few nice little moments here between Kirk and Latta, getting hot dogs, winning a bit of money, and just talking about the differences in their timelines. And it doesn't sound like, from what Kirk's been saying, that his timeline is a particularly good one. It sounds like a very war-ravaged time frame. There's no sunsets. There's, decimation from, war with the Romulans and everything that's been going on. It's not a really great place from the sounds of things. So it sounds like that they do definitely want to change things back to how it's supposed to be. We see an interesting scene next with Latta not being able to sleep. She's tossing and turning. She gets out of bed, has a bit of a voyeuristic look at Kirk sleeping. And you kind of feel like there's, some some emotions brewing there on La'an's behalf. You know, she's maybe experiencing some feelings towards Kirk. And the more comparing of histories that they do between the two of them, the more it definitely seems clear that they've got to patch things up with La'an's timeline and not worry about protecting Kirk's timeline, because it doesn't sound too good. At this point, we see the Ontario Lake Bridge destroyed in a catastrophic kind of terrorist attack. They go and investigate the destruction site and everything and work out that the bit of technology that's been used to cause this is somewhat futuristic, and that obviously there's some sort of time traveller from the future using future tech to instill these kind of terror attacks to unstabilise the timeline. In trying to track down the vehicle that has the wreckage in it, Kirk steals a Dodge Challenger, I think it is, by Vulcan nerve pinching the driver. Interesting that Kirk's been in prison in this particular time frame. He was in prison with the Vulcan as cellmates or something, and obviously the Vulcan has taught him how to do the nerve pinch whilst he was inside. Obviously there's a little bit of a learning curve to Kirk learning to drive. Initially he's doing a bit of bunny hopping or whatever, can't quite obviously work the clutch quite properly in the Dodge, but he obviously gets the hang of it pretty soon, and before long he's doing handbrake turns, squealing around corners in the car, so that was a bit of fun. Reminded me quite a bit of what Seven and Raffi got up to in season 2 of Picard. That sort of had similar dynamics in terms of driving vehicles and all that sort of stuff in a 21st century environment. I love the mistake that Kirk makes and calls La'an Noonien Sung rather than Noonien Singh. One obviously being Data's creator, the other being the maniac augment. Next we meet this sort of social media activist, Sara, who helps stop Kirk and La'an being arrested by the cops. And she seems to be a bit of a conspiracy theorist and knows a lot about what's going on and all these hidden agendas and everything. But at the same time, she doesn't quite seem to be who she says she is. We hear stories of alien abduction and photos of Romulan birds of prey in the Earth's skies and everything. So it definitely seems like the Romulans are trying to destabilise Earth to make sure that the Federation is never born. And it seems like the only way they can find this cold fusion reaction that they're looking for is by, they need a kind of tricorder or tricorder-esque device. They need an engineer. And obviously from the conversation that La'an had with Pelia earlier in the episode, works out that she's an art or antique collector or whatever in Vermont. They travel to Vermont to meet up with Pelia to try to get her to build some sort of scanning device to help them search out the cold fusion reactor. However, Pelia is purely an antique dealer and doesn't have any engineering knowledge whatsoever. So that doesn't quite go to plan, but yet somehow they're able to do some sort of jury rigging on a present day kind of diving watch or something, or an 80s diving watch that had something in it that makes the hands glow when it's near the reactor. It's sort of, that seemed a bit dubious to me, that, just the glowy hands on a watch could guide them to find a futuristic cold fusion weapon. That was a bit of a stretch. There's a bit of discussion from Kirk kind of saying, hey, your reality doesn't sound so bad. Maybe I can come back and hang out with you in your nicer Federation and Starfleet and everything, and not my horrible one where everything's kind of decimated and there's a war with the Romulans going on. And obviously they share a bit of an intimate moment, have a bit of a kiss here, and there's obviously some chemistry between the two. At which point the hands on the watch seem to glow. I thought, maybe they just were standing under a street light or something, and the street light was shining on the watch hands to make the fluorescent hands glow a little bit. No, apparently they're near the cold fusion reaction. Just they just happen to be walking through the city and they just happen to stumble across the right location. So yeah, there was a few little bits like this, I thought, with the whole watch hands business and finding the reactor that was a little bit of a stretch in terms of the whole suspension of disbelief aspect to think that was in fact an adequate detection device. And this location where it appears to be the Noonien Singh Institute. Interesting. Obviously, La'an gets access to the place by scanning her handprint, because obviously it's keyed to let anybody with Noonien Singh DNA in through the door. And it's here where we find out that Sara, our activist and everything, a conspiracy theorist, is in fact a Romulan spy. She's working on Earth to destabilise things, to turn the situation away from the Federation being in existence, and apparently killing Khan will do that because, I don't know, maybe Earth needs the slaughter and death and destruction that Khan brings to want to fix things up, I guess, and make things a bit better for Earth. So apparently this piece of history is required. Now there's been a bit of obviously a little bit of retconning here. Back in the original series, obviously they talked about the Augment War or whatever being in the sort of mid to late 90s. But that sort of got changed a few times. We've had a few little adjustments along the way. I think there's an episode of Season 2, Star Trek Picard, where we saw Brent Spiner playing Adam Sung in 2024, pulling out a folder with Project Khan written on it.
I thought we might have even got a cameo from Brent Spiner in this episode, reprising that exact same role here, him coming in at the end and maybe consoling Khan in some fashion or whatever, but it didn't happen.
So it would seem like wherever we happen to be in our timeline, things are kind of skewed a little bit from that. Pike even mentioned in the first episode of Season 1 of Strange New Worlds that the Augment War and everything happened in the mid-21st century. So obviously we've retconned a little bit of Star Trek history there so that the Augment War, rather than being in the late 90s, in the 20th century, was shifted 30 years in advance, which is, I think, what our Romulan spy also confirms, so that it's essentially now, I guess, playing out sometime around the mid 21st century. So I don't mind the fact that they've done this. It was the one piece of Starfleet history that I think was always going to be a bit of a stumbling point. The fact that the whole Khan business with the whole Augment situation, according to original series, was meant to be in the late 90s, but obviously we've obviously way surpassed that now in terms of our own time frame. So the fact that they've kind of retconned this and sort of changed the timeline a little bit to kind of reflect that, I think now at least makes more plausible sense that they have sort of made that adjustment.
Because of this Romulan operative messing with the timeline.
So I guess this probably puts the whole Augment War scenario, the eugenics wars and everything around the mid-21st century, and then I guess World War III probably towards the mid to late mid-21st century. We get Sara, the Romulan spy, pulling a gun on Kirk and La'an. Kirk kind of tries to bluff her a bit, but she calls his bluff, shoots him, and Kirk dies. We have a bit of a struggle between La'an and our Romulan spy Sara, and she gets killed by La'an and ends up disintegrating herself, much in a similar fashion to our Romulan spies and everything that we saw in Picard Season 1, how that they would, basically take some sort of kill pill or whatever that basically made their bodies disintegrate. So obviously she was some sort of Jad Vash or Tal Shiar operative. And it's kind of a sweet scene between La'an and Khan. La'an. So that was sweet. Her drying his tears and everything. He was a bit scared that she was going to maybe kill him, but obviously he's a necessary evil to ensure the survival of the Federation.
I thought it was interesting how the kids had red uniforms on in the photo on Khan's wall, and all of our augments that we saw in the Space Hit episode of TOS also were in red uniforms. So that was a bit of a interesting comparison there.
Our timeline gets fixed. La'an returns back to the future, and Pike and Una are there on the bridge giving Pelia a hard time about her antique collection. In the last moments of the episode, we see the temporal agent basically giving La'an a bit of a debrief, her confirming her involvement with the time travel agency that we saw in Voyager with Braxton and and Wells and everything. So that was a nice confirmation link there. She has to hand back in her little time travel device, fair enough. But she gets to keep the old watch as a bit of a memento, I suppose. And talks to Kirk on board the Farragut. He's a lieutenant. She kind of poses just asking some questions about her brother, like sort of as if it's just filling in the gaps of his service record or so forth. But she does it just to want to, I guess, feel better about the fact that Kirk survived and didn't get shot. And it definitely seems like there's some emotions there and some feelings from La'an towards Kirk that developed during their little time travel escapade. All in all, I think this was an interesting episode. I think that it was entertaining. It had some bit of humour in it. We got a bit of time travel stuff. There was a few bits and pieces that sort of played a little similarly to Raffi and Seven's adventure in Season 2 of Picard, but that's, I guess, okay. And the fact that we got a little bit of retconning going going on with the history of the eugenics wars and when exactly Khan was born and when he did his thing and everything, potentially then makes a little bit more sense to our overall history of Starfleet. But what did you guys think? Let me know your thoughts. Leave a thought in the comments section and we'll get chatting about that. Check out my merch in the merch store. There's heaps of hoodies and mugs and t-shirts and caps and everything. Great Star Trek designs. Be sure to check that out for great bargain prices. And I'll be back very soon with my next video. I'll see you guys soon.